Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for tuning into the CloudNativeFM podcast. Today is Thursday, and usually we try to do host live stream dedicated for that day as well. And I'm actually hosting a special edition today, the Cloud Native Wisdom, a short video series focusing on the trending topic and technologies and tool set that's really shaping the industry we have currently right now. And wisdom, we actually live streaming the wisdom episode for last four episode, I guess, just because there are some very cool topic. I want to have a very cooler and a very deep insight to the topic as well. And once again on Thursday, we're doing another wisdom live episode, and I have some very cool topic I really like about. I don't know about you, but these are very cool topic. What cloud native platform sovereignty, cloud native skills in demand, and observability tool for LLM. And these are the major agenda for today episode as well. And today you see as the background behind me, and that's specifically because Pakistan playing against England at the London Lords. And luckily, the guest you will be seeing very shortly on the screen is actually lives in that part of the world and as a very cool friend of mine, and you meet me all the time us on the different live streams. And once again we're hearing to entertain you or sometime scare you on the cloud native things happening all the time. Without any further delay, let's join the one and only, the greatest on the cloud native ecosystem. Richard Simon is here from Cloud Therapist. Richard, we are live again.
We are indeed, and it's good to be back with you for another Wisdom episode. Yeah, thank you. And I had no idea that Pakistan was playing with England in cricket at the Lord's ground, so that should be quite interesting. I should have worn my England shirt, I suppose. But I had no idea. So I thought I'll come with my Star Trek 2 t-shirt. Somebody complimented me on it the other day, which was quite nice to hear. So somebody said,
"Yes, it's a nice shirt,
nice t-shirt." Somebody said, "Nice t-shirt." I thought, yeah, thank you. So here we are. Yeah, I'm excited. We haven't done a wisdom episode for a while, so I'm certainly interested in it. Yeah, definitely three cool topics for today. I mean, we were kind of spoiled for choice, really, in terms of which ones to go for. But I'm glad you went for these three. I think these are quite interesting ones to look into.
Oh, 100%. And Richard, before we jumping on the topic, I think we did some live streams, and I think it's a while we joined the live stream because usually we're looking for the month that is a little bit relaxed for us because we live streaming a lot these days, like different conferences, KubeCon, AWS Summit London, sometime reInvent, and when we're not live streaming, we feel like on the offline we're live streaming. So this is kind of interested world we live in, but it's cool to be back, and we have some very good cool topic today. So we start with, I think we start with the one really paid attention these days, and I think me and you is always been screaming offline a lot about the word sovereignty. And luckily, and you can tell me the cloud native platform sovereignty. I will share the link in a minute on the screen, what we're talking about as well. But the CNCF actually launches a very good blog post on cloud native platform sovereignty through multi-plane architecture. So Richard, little bit back here because I think it's been we discuss a lot, but we need a refresher here. First thing first, you need to tell us a little bit about the sovereignty itself, and then we jump into the cloud native part of it.
Sure. So very briefly, I mean, sovereignty, seems to have certainly grown over the years. I mean, personally, it's working at T-Systems, we've always had sovereign cloud solutions, but now sovereignty, because of geopolitical sort of scenarios, it's taken a front seat, certainly. And this kind of idea of digital sovereignty, so it kind of goes beyond just your data being sovereign to either your organization or to your country perhaps, or to the political bloc or geography that you might be in. So we kind of always had that, I guess, digital, data sovereignty, but digital sovereignty sort of goes beyond that. It goes to things like, your compute. It goes to things like your operations, even down to your staff or your resources, where they may be running. So that's kind of the main sort of topic, digital sovereignty. And then just a slight offshoot from that is sovereign AI. So this, again, seems to be a relatively universal sort of term that people are using now in the industry to really kind of explain where their AI models are. So this is not necessarily just the training, but certainly the inference when that AI model is in production and doing something for your business. So where the data is, any sort of new data that's uploaded to it, any customer interaction so it may be public facing, and therefore it will interact with customers. Customers might upload, their data, personal data, things like that. So all of that is taken into account as far as what sovereign AI is all about, and that again makes it ensures that your model is sovereign, and again in accordance with with the requirements that you have for sovereignty. Not everybody needs the same level of sovereignty, digital sovereignty, but certainly it's important to be aware of the various levels that are available. And then, like I said, it's down to you as an individual, as an organization, or maybe as a country, on a country level, or indeed on a geographic or political bloc as well. But yeah, that's kind of the sovereign AI is the offshoot from the overall digital sovereignty.
Absolutely, thank you very much. I think that this term, I think I did an episode thanks to you actually connecting me with the Gabriel Gora on my YouTube channel. And he does a pretty good job at explaining from the political perspective and also on the technical perspective itself. Yeah. Usually we forget about how the geopolitical landscape changing the IT sector, and jump into the technical details, how the sovereignty, what kind of requirement it's need, what kind of tool and technologies it's need. Well, it's good to actually know a little bit about the background, why we're actually stressing on the fact that as well. So now, Richard, I will link the episode as well so people can watch out. So let's jump to the topic, because now the CNCF is also jumping on the word sovereignty. I think this year, KubeCon, I heard a little bit about talks specifically about sovereignty, speaking about how you actually build some of the infrastructure and AI-driven solution for sovereign layer on cloud, on on-prem, and different environment. But recently they wrote a little bit about the white paper or the blog post, and that literally we've been there for the CNCF landscape for a while. I think both of our channel discuss very details on the cloud native technologies, how they've been developed. Sometimes we talk with the CEOs of the company, sometimes from the enterprise customer consuming the cloud native technology, and sometimes our own perspective, because we also live and breathe on the cloud native technologies. But now the world is actually, the ecosystem, the cloud native ecosystem is trying to close the gap of the sovereignty. So what are the suggestions? One of the things where actually the cloud native fits in the sovereign layer, and what misses actually we have, like how much, like, is there really, do they care about the sovereign layer, and what are the ecosystem, like 420 open source technology tools available, most of the graduated, then the sandbox, and then sometimes the open source version of it. So how you look at the cloud native ecosystem plus the sovereign layer we talk about from the enterprise layer as well. So how those actually combine and fit together with that layer, and also talk about a little bit about your own perspective on this stuff as well. Over to you, Richard.
Yes, I mean, I guess, I mean, these are all the sort of the CNCF landscape is really there to, serve whatever project you're going to be doing, whether it's a sovereign project or not. The specific article that we were referring to, the cloud native platform sovereignty through a multi-plane architecture, I think is the title of the article from the CNCF. So it's actually on the CNCF website. That seems to be really arguing about, making so through the use of things like the Open Choreo project from the CNCF, making things like your Kubernetes clusters, compliant with sovereignty in some way. So that includes splitting out things like the various sort of services that you might be running, so things like observability and your FinOps and things like that, separate, and actually having a sort of a so-called set of planes that will be running those types of services, and those are in conjunction with the activity that you will have actually in your workloads on that Kubernetes cluster. So that, I think, is the overall sort of premise. I think the article mentioned the use of things like MTLS, so mutual TLS, to do the connectivity between those sort of separate planes and the Kubernetes control plane, and obviously with the use of things like declarative settings and things like that, that also will really set the boundaries, I guess, for these planes. So, I think it's kind of makes sense in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And my sort of really gripe is not necessarily with sort of how they're setting up as per this chart, which is in the article. So as I said, you have your normal sort of control plane, but then you have these different planes that are doing different things. You have things like your data, observability, workflow, etc. Now those are actually doing the calls, the MTLS outbound calls into the control plane. So the argument there is that there's nothing sort of inbound coming into those. It's actually they make the outbound sort of calls, and therefore that, as far as the article I think is concerned, defines them as being sovereign. So yes, that could be the case from a sort of software layer. But as I said earlier, digital sovereignty follows the EU's rules around the seal levels that they provide. So those are specific rules around, I think, 5 or 6 or whatever it is, seal levels that define the so-called sovereignty effectiveness assurance levels. That's the SEAL seal levels that the EU actually defines. I think it's about 6 of them. So it starts from 0, oddly enough, to up to 4, full sovereignty. So whether this is kind of meeting that and it kind of complies with all those things, it's certainly not defined here, and it's kind of not. There's no superimposing of that sort of those seal levels or that kind of requirement onto the designs here. But certainly, yeah, I mean, from a technical point of view, I guess this meets it. My concern with the with this whole way of doing things is, first of all, that you're forcing sovereignty down the Kubernetes path. So if you want to do sovereignty in any other way, you can't. Well, certainly not with this solution. And then there's a number of other areas that kind of make this quite a difficult thing to implement. So that includes things like operational complexity, obviously the increased cost because of the infrastructure and the resources that you require. Changes to this are going to make it a lot more difficult, or certainly slower, because you have to, there's probably interdependence between all the planes and the control planes. So you can't just kind of go and make changes very quickly. So that sort of feature delivery is going to be a lot slower than it would maybe normally be. So there's a lot more friction, I think, in this sort of design. Troubleshooting and then incident response again might be increased because, again, you have a lot more things you're juggling a lot more balls in the air, which means you have to go and investigate a lot more things if things go wrong. And then obviously this is not for your average everyday sort of users. It is pretty much kind of your Kubernetes experts who can actually implement this. But so there's a higher barrier to entry for kind of smaller teams and and startups and things like that. And as I said, I think the the main thing is that you're really forcing sort of sovereignty down the the Kubernetes sort of path for design and architecture, and that makes things like HA and DR quite difficult as well.
Absolutely. And I think when we did an episode on code to culture, platform engineering unpacked for enterprises, I think that's the one of the biggest worry when something comes up, everybody trying to add their own opinionated approaches on the available solutions out there.
Yeah.
But when something is very new in the IT market, and everybody came up with their own definition of the things they're actually trying to achieve here. Because I think right now one of the problem is that if you ask the sovereignty in itself, it has different meaning for the different stakeholders. Like the technology people try to define it a different way. The enterprises has their own need, and the later the geopolitical, the government has their own layer of definition into it. This one, and when you live in that part, and then you wrote paper to try to implement the technologies, as soon as you try to force and guard people out there, there's a little bit of trickling happening, starting to see. So now we see, yes, we people try to ask question like, yes, we know the sovereignty, it is, how do we enforce our people or the tool set to actually try to compliance to that one. Then now we build out the tools on top of it as well. But now it's too early to even consider what will be the ecosystem response to the sovereignty in general, because now we have open source tools that's actually been running all the way down to that layer. Now we have the MCP protocols where the tool and agent communicate with the third party vendors all the time. Now the data in itself on the database side, on the, let's say, the migration side of it, it's also been now in shaping quite drastically with the advent of the cloud native technologies and the container in particular. Now I think this requires a little bit of a more research and a more opinionated topic as well. I think usually the CNCF, what it does is they actually add the technical advisory board for those kind of research topic, and then they actually want them to pay attention to those, and the people can join it from any part of the world and be a part of the member. They have been doing out of this, see which of the teams actually been trying to write paper or the tool set or the technologies on the sovereignty layer as well, and I will share the detail as well. And we also, me and Richard also pay attention to heavily as well. I think right in the worry is that everybody trying to define it their own way. So when you try to define their own way of it, I think now you need to try to enforce set steps, and that's where people say now you're restricting us to be more productive than not. So I think there's a little bit of too early to actually comment or try to do add-on. But I think, as Richard said, observability is beyond Kubernetes, cloud native. It is that there are things that outside of the infrastructure layer that also need a very, very closer attention to this one. But I think on the topic of the blog post, I think they did a good job trying to communicate with the people, like what are the questions. I think one of the questions they have been addressing is good, like, can you operate without the vendor? Can outsider reach the key state or credential? Does a change of provider mean rewrite? So I think this is a very good question to ask here in the blog post, and they actually start from the bigger kind of layers into the platform, and then they move into the topologies, like how the control plane interact with the data plane, and the data plane can be on the different governance side of it thing. And then now I think they actually introduce in the last layer how the cluster you can spun up in the sovereign cluster typically mean. So I think it's a very detailed topic in there as well. And I think there's a one topic that Richard is actually mentioning is quite paying attention to this one, and we'll spend more time on that. That's called open choreo. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but it's very hard sometimes. on the open source of the system. So this one need to pay attention to this one. Like I think they have a website called openchoreo.dev. That's I we spend more time on it as well. But there's a future episode we can dedicate on that topic as well. Richard, do you have any last comments on the topic before we move on the next topic?
Yeah, so yeah, just very briefly. I mean, choreo, I guess, stands, short for choreography. I did hear once somebody was put up a chart. This is a long time ago now. Somebody put up a chart and it said on it observability and choreography, and I just thought, okay, let's not go as far as choreography. We've got things like orchestration. That's good enough. Let's not make it any more ridiculous than it already is. But I mean, open choreos, I guess it's it is a CNCF project. The idea of sort of introducing a multi-plane architecture where each of these so-called planes, so the control plane, the data observability, I think they got workflow in there, and the article experience, whatever that means. They all operate as sort of independent clusters. Okay, that's fine. And like I said, they all have their own sort of life cycle and security boundaries as well. So you can set that in the way that you kind of want to have that. So that topology will help, yes, organizations meet things like regulatory stuff, markets, sector, regulation and stuff like that. So maintain jurisdiction, of course. You can enforce sort of governance around that, I guess, as well. Maybe it helps you with avoiding vendor lock-in. Now, this is interesting, this vendor lock-in, because this is this design is kind of very close to that sort of independent control plane that has also been actually suggested in other architectures as well. And actually, I've advocated for a sort of a separate control plane layer where all of these activities happen. So your FinOps, your observability, data management, network management, your security, everything happens. And that normally in a non sort of non-sovereignty sort of design, it just gives you independence from from that, let's say, that public cloud that you happen to be running in that hyperscaler environment. But that idea also lends itself to sovereignty, which is, I think, why we're sort of seeing a replication of that here with this solution, and using things like open choreo as well. So yes, I think that's fine. But I think, like I said, what I said earlier, my negative points still really stand, because you are increasing complexity, cost. You're going to need more resources for this. Troubleshooting is going to be harder. It's a higher barrier for entry if you have a small team. And you're, like I said, you are forcing sovereignty down the Kubernetes design route, whether you like it or not.
Absolutely. And I think we talk about the open choreo. I think a few years back in 2022, there's a notion of called choreography is started as the more alternative approach to the orchestration. And I think they spun up a very cool project during the time of the VMware called Cartographer. And I did an episode with Venshama Janjoy, I think. And he actually did a very good job explaining what the Cartographer is. And now I think that VMware is acquired by the Broadcom and team is distributed. I don't know what happened to that project. The Cartographer is. Might be they actually split the Cartographer. So actually they came up with a new tool or the new open source called Open Choreo. So I think it pays attention to it, but I think the root is actually coming from that Cartographer layer itself as well. Just a little bit, I think the recap on what we fundamentally think that I think one of the link I shared earlier on the CNCF website where we're talking about, I think the articles explain wonderfully that cloud sovereignty is not simply about where workload and data are located. It is fundamentally about where control, state, key, telemetry, and operational authority reside at. And I think it proposed a multi-plane architectures that separate control plane, data, workload, observability, workflow, and developer experience responsibility into distinct cluster with outbound MTLS connection, helping maintain strong security and jurisdictional boundaries. I think one of the things we spoke about here is that most of the people, I think, the miss between the sovereignty and data residency, and they're not actually the same kind of a same equation or the same coin. And we actually been a very good topic, and I will reserve this for the next episodes of the cloud native wisdom, the difference between the sovereignty and the data residency, how they're different and similar in some perspective. I think the article explained about the separate the planes, like control plane, data plane, observability plane, workflow flow plane, experience plane. And they said that keep sensitive workload inside jurisdictional boundaries, and outbound only communication improve the security boundaries, and combined platform architecture with TNet isolation makes sovereignty declarative, and sovereignty has its limits. So it's a good topic. I think it's overall the good foundational laydown of the theory in itself. But we'll see. Share your comments in the YouTube chat, because that will really pick up what you people got things about the topic in itself. So Richard, another topic for you, and I think this is a very cool topic, and they deserve a little bit more attention. I think we can spend time more in the next upcoming live stream and asking our guest about this topic, and specifically when we host some of the upcoming live stream as well. But up to you now. What are the cloud skills in demand? I think this is one of the $1 million questions, Richard. What are the cloud skills in demand?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say it's business as usual for for most of them, because despite all the sort of discussions around AI and AI taking over our jobs and things like that, jobs still need to be done, and need to be done by humans. So I would say to anybody who's kind of wants to get into this space, do learn all the stuff that you need to learn to kind of get into the cloud native open source sort of spaces. I think that those skills will still be in demand regardless of how much automation and sort of auto generated code is happening with AI code assistance and vibe coding and all those other things that are coming down the line. So yeah, I mean, the article kind of argues that cloud expertise has kind of become foundational for modern technology. I would definitely agree with that, because everybody's doing cloud of one kind and one type of size or percentage or another. So that's definitely the case. But obviously, kind of staying relevant requires, I guess, more focus on the appropriate skills, rather than trying to learn everything at once, which is quite correct. Maybe you can specialize in a particular area. Maybe you already like a particular area, maybe like development or cloud infrastructure or platform engineering or observability or whatever it is that you want to get into. If you're new, or if you're looking to maybe transition or even expand. So maybe somebody's kind of been doing lots of SRE, and now they fancy doing more observability and platform engineering and cloud infrastructure, and that's fine too. I think this kind of really is open. This particular post is kind of quite open in terms of where you're coming from, whether you're a junior and kind of want to just to get in and get your first job, or you're looking to to cross train and things like that. So it kind of breaks down the essential capabilities, I guess, across sort of any cloud platforms, automation, things like DevOps, security. And yeah, cloud is not a single skill or a particular layer in that stack. You maybe have to kind of be knowledgeable in multiple layers of the stack. And yes, you could maybe choose a particular path, like I said. So maybe you're coming from one and you want to transition to another path, or you have a passion for one of those paths. So that could be DevOps, or, as I said, security, cloud engineering, whatever it is. But that certainly is important. And obviously getting your hands, dirty with real life projects, not just playing in the lab and stuff like that. And that can be useful, and obviously doing your training and a little bit of certification. But definitely, I mean, we tend to look for experience as well. that's always interesting. And that experience is useful, I think, in certain cases, but in others, we're quite open, certainly to, T-Systems, we're kind of quite open to, bringing in folks that are, junior sort of in their careers, but then we sort of train them up and they work hand in hand with our senior guys. So that's certainly a part of it. So looking at multi-cloud, yes, you need to master more than one cloud, maybe AWS and Azure, kind of hedge your bets with that. Certainly learn things like infrastructure as code. If you're going to do kind of cloud infrastructure stuff and cloud designs like landing zones, for example, and things like that. So things like Terraform, Pulumi, Ansible, Crossplane, those are kind of the types of tools to look at. And then, you move, from maybe that and into kind of a little bit more around, automation. So kind of looking at automation tools and how you do that with, if you're kind of on the development side, maybe you look at, things like workflows and CI/CD pipelines and stuff like that. And how do you kind of, make that happen in those sorts of environments? And then looking at, scaling that automation, scaling the provisioning of certain workloads and software stacks and things like that. Security is certainly important. So again, understanding things like zero trust, cloud native security, so things like secrets managers and service registries and IAMs and authorization and authentication, things like that. I think all of those are quite relevant. So that is kind of maybe the infrastructure part of it, and then you've got things like, as I said, DevOps, platform engineering, GitOps, and so on, which kind of go beyond that sort of cloud infrastructure build. And those get into more specific areas like Docker and Kubernetes and observability tools such as Prometheus and Grafana and things like that. And then beyond that, you might want to consider looking at things like service mesh, as I said, maybe GitOps as a next sort of iteration of that as well. And then eventually you kind of get to things like serverless functions as a service and things like that. But I would say it's kind of the infrastructure piece that kind of get that stack to understand that, learn about security and networking and storage. Those are always going to come up, those three things. So apart from learning to build the landing zones and understanding the AWS architecture, the well-architected framework, the Azure well-architected framework, and so on. Beyond that, like I said, it's those particular domains, so like security, networking, and things like that, and storage. You need to know those as well. Those are all the basic domains, and then, like I said, you're off to other areas: DevOps, observability, FinOps, GitOps, and so on. All come later on.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I think there's a sometime we have a little bit joke about the stuff that as well. When you talk about the cloud skills in demand, what things we don't learn here, because we have to learn all the stuff. Like as you mentioned, I think it's a very steep learning curve. That's particularly sure. And I think it's been sometimes people really jump into the container ecosystem faster. They try to know what the container is, then the journey jumps from the cluster or orchestration technologies like Kubernetes. Then there's a little bit of the ladder, like when you jump into that part, like now there's a GitOps. Now you need to know the policy as code. Now you need to know the observabilities tool. Now you need to know the Grafana, Prometheus, and the stacks eventually comes up like that. And then now we live in a world like every other technologies. Now we have the MCPs, like there's a tool you have been using, there's a corresponding AI agent associated with it. Now you need to know, like, if you need to actually adopt those tools to accelerate your adoption to any technologies. That's where the little bit of I think the confusion arrives. Some people start early intersecting or chatting with the AI agent. That sometimes can be very misleading because all the technology has its own learning curve. So, and I think at today's world, if you build out any roadmap for any kind of a skill, this has been really hard. There's a short path for for the technologies, and there's a long path for it. So people try to use the short path that's easier for them, but the longest part is still you need to chase, because That's where you need to have a fundamental knowledge about the cloud in terms, because cloud is also, as we spoke about the sovereignty, cloud is also a little bit of geopolitical term in some cases. Like, oh, there's a technical aspect into it, then the economical aspect into it, and then where you put your data on, like from the cloud perspective, that's also a little bit of a challenging part. So when you learn about the cloud, so there's always been a push toward the demanding technologies, but we always forget about the economic and geopolitical side of it as well. I think that's a little bit of important these days, because putting the data in any region these days requires a lot of research, a lot of approvals, a lot of anything as well. And then we live in a world that the cloud actually innovate itself from the open source technologies. Like every open source technology comes along, there's a corresponding cloud service available for you. So I think if you need to put a very hard patch for learning the tool chain of the cloud, I think you can go and spend more time into the open source technologies. Sometimes we don't have time for it, and sometimes we do it just because we need to have a deeper dive into any technologies. Then you eventually jump into the cloud. That would be an easier path for those. And then there's a shorter path as like you build out, you put out some knowledge. I these days I often look at even the beginners, like only 6 year of 6 months of internship experience to one of the companies. Yeah, 4 or 5 certification, Richard. I think there's not back then in your era, but today is you find people from the internet that have done 8, 9 certification with 1 year of experience in the market. So that's also been another kind of a way people try to actually compete a lot these days on the certification side, on the contribution side, on the demanding skill side as well. I think building out the currently, I think bypassing any of the technologies is can be a wrong. We don't know where the ecosystem been evolving. Sometime our prediction will be very wrong. Like back in days, we talk about, oh, AI will be taking like 10 more years to be there, but it is eventually it's been very rapid pacey. Now we come to the point where interacting with the AI agent, and previously when think about in 2020, oh no, do not do anything with the kind of AI integrated capabilities, but now we running it securely with all of the tools out there. So forgetting or ignoring any technology kind of be misleading here, but I think at least I think you have to be familiar with the container, the orchestration technologies. Observability is very important these days. I think one of the more fundamental thing I think enterprises and the individual should pay attention is the how skill set your teams are when something goes wrong, and how your observability stack is actually structured around. I think that's become the very KPI layer for you these days, because I think much stronger the observability or resilient layer the observability is, you are actually been in a relaxed zone. Otherwise, there's always been a tension going on. What did what things happening, what will happen tomorrow, and these things can be bad out as well. Richard, I think before we can go to the next and final topic, any of the more any of the summary of on the cloud skills and demand?
Just very quickly. I mean, I would argue that if you're starting out, if you're moving from like the data center and you want to kind of get into the cloud, the really learning the hyperscaler sort of solutions and getting skills in that is probably initially more important than specifically open source sort of tools, whether it's a CNCF or anything else. And the reason for that is because enterprises will expect you to be knowledgeable in the cloud that they're in. So if they're using AWS or Azure or GCP or whatever, they'd expect you to have skills in that and the tools that come along with that platform. So the observability tools, the FinOps tools, the automation tools, the infrastructure as code tools, whatever, that come with that particular platform. Now, those tools might be based on open source projects, so they might be Terraform or whatever, but nevertheless, they are that hyperscaler's version of those tools. So you should really look at learning, the skills and the technologies that are in that public cloud that are provided by that hyperscaler, versus just going off and learning Terraform and Pulumi and stuff like that. So that's why I'm kind of slightly deliberately not necessarily going into particular project names. I kind of named a few, but trying to really mostly stay away from that because in AWS you'll have cloud formations, for example. So cloud formation will be their sort of infrastructure as code tool. And you've got things like Bicep and ARM and whatever for Azure. So I think those are more useful for enterprises to begin with. And then when you see that, yes, this particular employer, this company or organization that I'm working for does use Pulumi or does use Crossplane or something, then great. Okay, I can go now and learn that specifically because we seem to be quite heavily into Crossplane or into Pulumi or something as a open source tool. And then we can make you can go and learn that and hopefully positively contribute to that. But initially it will be the skills, I think, for the public clouds that you need to learn, and then specialize more and experiment with the open source projects as well. And that will be helpful both in maybe the adoption of those in the future, or as I said, if they're already adopted in some way, you can go and learn that as a secondary thing. But initially, it's actually learning the and certifying in the skills that the cloud providers, the hyperscalers, offer you as far as public cloud is concerned. Now, just touching on AI very briefly, saying because I think that's quite important. I think it's unfair, and I don't think I would expect anybody to come in and have a full knowledge of the full stack of AI sort of tools and whatever to stand up and a model, an AI model. I think that's quite specific, and invariably that tends to be specialized teams, and you're going to need a whole bunch of folks to make that happen. But what you can do is actually build the landing zone, build the base cloud infrastructure that's required for that AI model to come in on top and be stacked on top of it. I don't think you'll be expected to learn all of the all the tools and all the layers of the AI stack, but certainly you can build the base for that AI stack. That should be part of the skills that you learn. As I said, looking initially at those being from the public cloud provider, the hyperscaler platforms and certifications, rather than certifying for Crossplane or something like that separately. So stick to the public cloud certifications first. Get those under your belt. Maybe AWS, maybe Azure, maybe both if you can, and then move on to specific open source projects, and certainly learn how to try and go up that software stack as much as you can in terms of how you would stand up, how you'd build an AI model as well. Like I said, it may not be that you need to do all of that, but certainly kind of what is the basics of that. And for a really good clue, go and look at HPC. Go look at how HPC does its builds, high performance computing, because as I keep saying all the time, and even on my channel, AI is an HPC workload, and you'll be surprised how much cross-pollination there is of the tooling between HPC and AI software stacks.
Oh, absolutely, totally agree with you. And I think the next topic, Richard, we're actually speaking about is actually similar in contrast to the skills in demand section as well. And as you speak about I think right now there's a push for the observability is a lot. I don't know what actually caused that. I think we do invest more on that topic as well. But right now, the vendors and the enterprises really need a player in their team that actually has a very high demanding skills or very much familiar with the observability tools we have and how the AI actually consuming some of these services outside of its boundary as well. So Richard, the next topic is LLM tool for observability. What are the things you have seen quite recently and that actually make you to dig a little bit deeper here as well? And also there will be a very sooner on our YouTube channel, there's a series coming up on the GenAI observability, and we actually won't actually close here, but there will be a very cool series coming up. But Richard, starting the topic, LLM tool for observability, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so I think first of all we need to kind of really distinguish between the types of observability here. So first of all we have our normal observability. So that kind of is again changing, and as Saim said, we will be diving deeper into that in a series of episodes in the upcoming sort of months. So we will be discussing that, including the influence of AI in this sort of the overall observability space. So that will be definitely part of what we're discussing. But I think so that's kind of the normal conventional workload observability. So that's kind of your Kubernetes clusters and whatever else you happen to have. There is also the AI observability. So you're just kind of observing the AI stack that you may have. So maybe you're running a model or two, and I don't know, maybe that could be in the public cloud, or could be running in your own data center or colo, whatever it happens to be. Not again not important where it is, but certainly monitoring that stack and monitoring all of the layers of that stack, as we just mentioned in the previous topic. That's also important. So that actually obviously allows you to monitor, I don't know, the Kubernetes clusters that are running that AI model, the load balancers, and whatever else, all the orchestration tools and scheduling tools that you require, and things like that. If you're doing training, and if you're doing inference, again, similar. There's particular tools and so on in that software stack, that AI software stack. So that's kind of looking at the layers of that software stack that is specific to AI and to that particular model that you have. Now that is different from what's being said in this particular article, and this one's actually talking about LLM observability. So you're now looking at the LLM and inside of the LLM, and what is the LLM doing? So it's actually the kind of the AI layer, the logical layer of what the LLM's doing, not the mechanics of running that LLM. Okay, so that's what I described as the previous, the sort of AI observability. That's just looking at the AI model that you're running, but that's not looking inside the LLM that's in that AI stack, which is, I think, where this article is going. So this one talks about, things like monitoring hallucinations, for example, and bad retrieval. It looks at non-deterministic and emergent behavior. So stuff that you didn't really tell it to do, but now it's doing that because it's it's an AI brain, it's an artificial intelligence, right? So this is more emergent type observability, not conventional or expected type observability. Looking at things like complex workflows and multi-agent systems. So how does your agent talk to another agent? A good example of this was if you have an AI agent and then you ask the AI agent to go and perform a particular task, and one of the tasks it needs to do is talk to an MCP server, and then from the MCP server it goes beyond to a third-party platform or third-party application. Now, what did it tell the MCP server? What did the MCP server do? And what did the MCP server return back to our agent? That kind of flow all needs to be observed. Why do we need to do all of this? At the bottom line is because of governance and auditability. That's why we need to have this. We cannot allow a system to be running around in our live production environment and we don't know what it's going to do. We need to have it within a guardrail, within a predictable guardrail. It may not be. It can make it can make the choices, but we know what the choices are.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Already. Yeah, we know what the answers are already. So there's kind of within a guardrail of how we perform that. So we're almost kind of being omniscient when it comes to what the AI model is going, how the AI model is going to behave and what it's going to do and say, right? It may say in a different way, but it is within the expected answer. Yeah, and that's, I think, what what this LLM observability is about. So it looks at things like prompt tracing, as I said. It looks at tokens and cost monitoring. That's not something that your stack AI, your AI observability would do, but your LLM observability would need to do that, maybe in conjunction with your FinOps tool. Things like evaluating of all the different frameworks, looking at diagnostics for things, stuff like RAG and so on. So all of these, as well as workflows, as I said earlier, and so on. So all of these things are there. And the chart which goes along with the article is actually quite nice. It describes a number of these LLM observability tools or platforms. So it talks about LangFuse, LangSmith, Datadog obviously have one, Lunary, and a number of others are all part of that sort of observability tool set. So we need to have that kind of capability, this kind of LLM observability, not AI observability, but we need to have this kind of level of LLM observability for like I said, for compliance and for governance and auditability. We have to show an auditor that we're able to, we have full control over this model in terms of, what we train it on, what RAG we use for it as well subsequently, but also what did it do? When it spoke to that MCP server, what happened in that conversation and what did the MCP server return, to our AI agents? So all of those things, I think, need to be part of it. And I think this is what this LLM observability chart and all the kind of the tools available are looking at. I can't hear you, Saim, I'm afraid. I think you might be on mute.
Oh, thanks, Richard. I'm saying that you're absolutely right about, because I think, speaking of the cloud skills in demand, and also speaking about our previous section, and are now overlapping both of the topic on the LLM observability tool. I think right now what happening is that it's like there's a new certification being winding up in the industry. I recently been involved in the Model Context Protocol exam, one of the author of the exam, helping the Agentic AI Foundation help curate that exam as well. I will be sharing more details about that as well, what the exam look like as well. But speaking of all the things you actually has mentioned, IT sector is realize that this is a completely new spectrum where we live in right now, and we need to test the knowledge of the individual to actually being able to understand how much the skills have taught. We will discover again in the next wisdom episode the certification like model context protocol. Are they really worth it? Is it too early? What it actually, if you pass the certification, what actually add a star this new mean for your resume as well? But as you mentioned, I've seen this, that having these kind of more on the organizational side, more on the cloud code and the open AI, they're rolling up their own certification, the foundation running up their own certification as well. So there's a new ecosystem is evolving up all the time. I think right now figuring it out, like which technology tool set I have and how do I combine the LLM tool for observability is a very, very big case. It's need a lot of research, a lot of table talks, and a lot of opinionated approaches. You need to actually experiment without actually going to the final decision you have to make here as well. Because I think number one is it has a problem of security, and number two, it's a problem of sovereignty, together with how actually we want the AI to evolve and how the LLM tool need to be integrated with existing pipelines or existing systems or existing cloud providers. I think there's a very big debate as well, like how because not everybody running everything from the scratch. There's a companies who build out their system for the last 40-50 years, and now the new LLM tools and technologies is winding up, and they want to know how you actually interject those things together. So it's been a very dedicated hour. But Richard, we are top of the hour. Any final comments before we wrap up the discussion here as well? And we keep our secret here because sooner we hit our promo series started sooner on the GenAI observability. All I can say here is there's an enterprise guest, there are vendors, and there are some very good technology leaders actually been joining us on Cloud Native FM, Cloud Therapist. So you are in very much safe hand. Richard, over to you.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely. I think on, I mean, these these topics that we've covered today are very sort of relevant and certainly of interest in various areas. And things like sovereignty, is being discussed quite a lot around sort of which skills you need to have. I'd say you still need the skills. AI hasn't replaced us quite yet, so go out there and get yourself certified, especially on the public clouds. And certainly observability is expanding, and as the same said, kind of nice segue into what we were saying. Yeah, we're definitely working on a multi-episode series around observability. It's going to look at all the AIs, as the same said, bring in lots of experts from vendor, enterprise space, and so on, all going to be participating. So that should be good fun for us to do, and we're looking forward to doing that over the next few months. Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting to see. And we're going to be splitting hosting duties between Cloud Native FM, Same's channel, and my own channel, Cloud Therapist, as well. So yeah, do check that out. Stay with us. Enable all of the notifications and stuff like that. I noticed that YouTube keeps unsubscribing some of my subscribers as well, which is quite weird. So do make sure that you are subscribed to our channels to get all the latest stuff, and we'll be making lots of announcements around the new observability series fairly soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Richard, once again for diving very deep into the technologies on the topics we started today. It's been always nice to actually have your opinion on such topic as well, because it's very crucial for my audience to know from your point of view how the things evolving, because you always go to the conferences for talking to people live, and you always have a very bigger umbrella of conversations compared to mine. So I always appreciate that as well. But we will be doing again some more wisdoms. I think more monthly review.
I think we may have lost Saim. I don't know if he'll be back or not. Let's give him a minute, and then I may have to close us out, folks. Let me see if he'll be back in. Okay. I think we may have lost him. Okay, never mind. I'm sure he'll find his way back if he can, and if not, then I will close us out. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us. If you're watching this on replay, check out the chat, because we've dropped in all the links for that there. As I said earlier, please do subscribe to Cloud Native FM, Same's channel, and to my Cloud Therapist channel, which is my channel. We would appreciate that. That'll be quite cool. But yeah, and also drop us any comments that you might have in terms of the topics that we've discussed. How do you feel about them? Are you doing anything around observability and certification? Are you into Kubernetes? Are you kind of looking at sovereignty and stuff like that as well? That'll be, yeah, we'll be, would really appreciate that. I think that'll be quite useful. So I think that's it. Same's not coming back. So on behalf of Same, Cloud Native FM, and on behalf of myself, Richard Simon, Cloud Therapist, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next Wisdom episode. Bye for now.